What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to be giving you my college football playoff and New Year's Six bowl game predictions, but we're also going to add another little thing onto these videos. I've done one of these videos every single week, predicting who I think is going to make the college football playoff, the way the nation currently stands, as well as New Year's Six bowl games. We're going to add in reacting to the college football playoff rankings. The first rankings just came out last night. And we're going to be reacting to those as well, do a little short, brief breakdown of kind of some takeaways from the committee this year. But before we dive on into all that, you guys know I got to say thank you for the support the channel has seen as of late. It means a lot to me. And if you guys want to continue to show your support, biggest way you can do that is to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when videos get uploaded. But guys, there are a lot more ways than that to help me support this channel. You're doing one of them right now simply by watching the video, and you can do more by liking, commenting, sharing, really anything else you guys feel like you're willing and able to do to help interact and support the channel. Again, anything you guys do means a lot to me. So with all that out of the way, let's dive on into reacting to the first ever college football playoff rankings, or I should say the first college football playoff rankings for 2023. Came out yesterday on Halloween, and there were some really spooky inconsistencies, pun absolutely intended, here with the way that the playoff committee ranks these teams. Now, before I talk about the actual rankings that you see right down here below you, I do want to mention that before people start getting upset about why is this team number one, why is this team below this team, why is this team ahead of this team, so on and so forth, you also need to realize that, look, let's go look back at some previous years, right? Ohio State's number one in these initial rankings. I've seen a lot of people complain about that. Tennessee was number one in the rankings last year, and of course they were a team that barely even finished inside of the top 10 because of some losses that they had there down the stretch. So when you take a look at these rankings, things are going to work itself out, right? There is still a ton of football left to be played. We have a whole month left to go. Things are going to work itself out, especially with two teams that are inside of the committee's top three right now. And also, I see a lot of people complaining about, there's no one unique formula. The playoff committee is different every year. We never know where they're going to go. And yeah, there are new people on the committee every single year. It's going to be a somewhat different formula every year. Now, are the criteria the same that they look at? Yes. Are they weighted differently? Also, yes. I know, very confusing, hard for some people to get their heads wrapped around, but this version of the committee right here, what I learned from them yesterday, seeing these initial rankings come out, was that okay, so it's really weird and inconsistent. It's kind of a what have you done for me lately bias. It's also a who have you played, who have you beat, what does your resume look like? And there are a whole lot of inconsistencies with those teams there. Head to head, do they care about it? Do they not? I'm going to talk about that here as well. But your top four look like this. Ohio State is sitting there at number one. I didn't put out a prediction video as to where I think where I thought the committee were going to rank teams, but I do think that the committee got this one not necessarily right, but at least as of right now, Ohio State definitely has the best resume. You take a look, they got wins against Penn State and Notre Dame, especially that Notre Dame game being on the road. Those are two teams that rank inside of the top 15, at least according to the College Football Playoff Committee. You have a win over Maryland, who, have struggled as of late, but they're still a plus 500 team. You got a good win against Wisconsin on the road. And overall, you could argue why Ohio State, out of any team on the board, has the best resume in the country. Even though they have not looked as dominant, that's why they are sitting at number one. You take a look at Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State there. And then, look, if you're going to use the resume thing to talk about why Ohio State is number one, then that same argument could be said on why Florida State should be number two. You have a win over LSU, who currently sits at number 14. And if you're going to talk about wins over teams that are above 500, Florida State has more of those than anyone else in the entire country. So kind of looking at, the Georgia and Michigan, yes, Michigan's been dominant all year long, but again, you could use the resume argument. Who have they played? And then Georgia up here at number two, they've started to pile together some really good wins here as of late. Kentucky, and Florida. And this is a Georgia team that, look, if you're worried about Georgia being 2 and now Kirby Smart has his fuel to the fire, Georgia's resume is going to get a lot better if they continue to win games, as you have to play Missouri this week. Tennessee's still there. Ole Miss is still there. And those are teams that the committee's ranked inside of their top 17. So Georgia's going to get those marquee wins. Of course, Ohio State, Michigan still has to play each other. Michigan still has to play Penn State. But if you're going just based off of resume, and that's why Ohio State is at number 1, is because of their resume. Florida State needs to be higher. Maybe Washington needs to be higher. But again, there's sort of that what have you done for me lately sort of conversation going on as well. And Washington has struggled against 2 bottom teams in the Pac-12. So they're right now sitting outside of the top 6. And here's where the head-to-head starts to matter a little bit, as Washington is ahead of Oregon. And then Texas is ahead of Alabama. But if you also want to get into the resume thing, you could say, well, why is Alabama below Oregon? Their resume is better. Oregon has looked like a better football team as of late. There's kind of the what have you done for me lately bias there as well. And it doesn't really seem to matter who you've lost to, because Oklahoma's 1 loss is to Kansas. Ole Miss's 1 loss there is to Alabama. Alabama ahead of Oklahoma. Meanwhile, Ole Miss not ahead of Oklahoma. So definitely some inconsistencies there to figure out. You could have the same conversation when you move down the line with Missouri and LSU, right? LSU, even though they do have 2 losses, they've beaten Missouri, and their only other losses are to Florida State and Ole Miss, 2 teams the committee has inside their top 10, yet Missouri is still above LSU. Again, kind of that what have you done for me lately thing. And then you could have the same argument with Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State down there as well. And the other thing interesting I wanted to talk about with this playoff committee is they right now are favoring Tulane over the Air Force Falcons, which is very, very surprising considering the way that both these 2 teams have played. Again, resume comes into effect. Air Force haven't really beaten anyone super notable. Yes, there are a lot of good teams in the Mountain West Conference, but Tulane, their only 1 loss is to a team the committee has inside their top 10 in the Ole Miss Rebels. Right now, when you take a look at Tulane, they've also beaten some pretty solid teams within the American Athletic Conference and have been fairly competitive, although I would argue that Air Force is playing better football right now. But the committee still is going to favor the Tulane Green Wave. So a lot of interesting conversations you could have here within these rankings. Again, to the people out there that are getting upset that your team is not as high, not as low, maybe you have some other quarrels as to why some teams are ranked where. Things are going to figure itself out. November is a busy month. A lot of big games still to come in the Pac-12 conference. Ohio State and Michigan still have to play each other. Michigan and Penn State still have to play each other. There's a whole lot of chaos that can go on there in the SEC, as Georgia still has a lot of big games on their slate. Things are going to work itself out. Again, these are the first initial rankings, and while, yes, there are some inconsistencies, and it's frustrating, I know, to really not know what the playoff committee is fully looking at, things are going to work itself out. Whether you're number 1 or you're number 25 right now, things are going to work itself out. I promise you that. So let's go ahead now and dive on in to my projected college football playoff bracket. And this bracket is kind of a mix of my opinions and feelings and the way that I saw the committee rank teams, and what I've done recently when putting out my college football playoff bracket is, as of right now, these are the 4 teams that I think are making the college football playoff. Ever since now, especially now that we have the college football playoff rankings, we know what the committee kind of thinks. There's going to be a little bit of projecting outward here. There is going to be a little bit of projecting outward, and it starts out with the team that I have at number 1. It is different from last week. It's the Georgia Bulldogs. Look, when you take a look at this Georgia Bulldog team, the reason that they are ranked above Michigan right now is, yes, they've played some better opponents than Michigan as of late, but also their resume is going to get a whole lot stronger if they continue to win games. Again, you still have games against Ole Miss, Tennessee, and this week you have to play Missouri, and then don't discount Georgia Tech either. That's a team that currently right now sits at 500. So this is a Georgia team that their resume is going to get a really, really big boost over the month of November, and I think if they can win out and they win the SEC, Georgia will yet again be the number 1 team, and they'll get into the All-State Sugar Bowl there. Number 2 is Michigan. Right now, I think currently still the favorite to be able to beat Ohio State in Ann Arbor, get to the Big Ten championship game, and win that conference. And even though Michigan may only have their best wins right now, at least against Rutgers and maybe Minnesota, their resume is going to get padded up as well if they continue to win out, right? You have a game against Penn State coming up in 2 weeks. Maryland, even though they've been sliding, they're still no slouch of a football team. And then, of course, the game against the current #1 team in the nation in the Ohio State Buckeyes, sitting there at #1. You get them at the end of the season, again, in the Big House as per usual. They're going to be left with the Rose Bowl. Don't think they'll be too upset about that. #3 right now is Florida State. Now, it would be Washington if Washington was above Florida State in these rankings. But right now, the way that the committee, trying to get into the thought process of the committee here, the way the committee is ranking teams right now, Florida State is getting that #3 spot. Again, they have more wins over 500 or above teams than anyone else in the country, and Florida State's playing some really good football right now. This is a really, really deep team. You could make the case and make the argument on why this team, with the resume, with the win over the LSU, a lot of other really, really good wins, they should be sitting up there at #2, which is a very, very fair argument to have. However, again, things are going to work itself out. I believe Florida State not really in danger of losing another game until the ACC championship, although again, it is college football in November. Upsets do happen, but Florida State, you win out and you win the ACC, you're going to be in the college football playoff. I believe that's the way it sits right now. So now the conversation around #4 becomes very interesting, right? You still have Ohio State, who right now, the way that it seems, with the way that their resume is padded, again, that's why the committee has Ohio State at #1. You got 2 top 15 wins, and then you got some other pretty solid wins in there as well against the likes of Maryland, and then on the road in a tough environment in Camp Randall, the Buckeyes were able to get it done by 14 points. So you still have them, you still have Washington, you still have Oregon, and you still have the 2 teams in the Big 12 conference there as well with Texas and Oklahoma. I don't trust Texas or Oklahoma right now to be able to make it out. And then the way that Washington is playing, who knows? They may lose this game to USC, and then the Pac-12 does the thing where it cannibalizes itself. So, and the way that the committee is ranking these current teams, I believe right now the committee's top 4 is the way that I'm projecting outward. I do put Ohio State in here at #4. I think what the committee showed us is that, especially if some of these other conferences eat themselves alive, which right now is still very much so on the table. A lot of big games still to come in the Big 12, especially this week. I'll have a lot of videos on those games out tomorrow. Again, there are 3 big ones in the Big 12. All of them will be out tomorrow. A lot of big games still to come in the Pac-12, especially on the schedule of Washington and Oregon, 2 teams that right now are on a collision course to get to the Pac-12 championship game. And again, Ohio State sitting at 1. You probably have the most impressive resume in college football up to this point. You could get some more really marquee wins here. Rutgers is a bowl-eligible team. You could get the win over them. Minnesota, more than likely, is going to be a bowl-eligible team. You could get the win over them, and we know Michigan State is a dumpster fire. But then also, if you're able to beat Michigan there, and maybe it doesn't matter what you do against Michigan. Maybe you win, maybe you lose. There's still a path for Ohio State either way to get into the college football playoff, and that's the way that I see it as of right now. So, again, don't be too upset with my predictions and projections either. Again, things are going to work itself out, and I can assure you this prediction will not be the same this week that it will be next week. I assure you there are going to be some changes as a lot of big games are set to take place this week. Moving forward from here, same 2 teams I've had in my national championship game all season long. Georgia and Michigan, I believe, still will be duking it out for that national championship trophy, with Michigan still holding on to that national championship. Now, the other conversation that I was very intrigued to see the playoff committee do was, are they going to punish Michigan for this whole sign stealing thing? The Big Ten hasn't done anything yet, which to some people, including Paul Feinbaum, is inexcusable. That's not my job. I'm not going to sit here and say what is to be of Michigan. I'm not going to drop them out of the playoff because of it. I'm not going to drop them out of the top 4 because of it. Again, I still am a firm believer that Michigan has looked like the best team in the country, even though their resume is not up to standard of some of the other teams in the country. Michigan has looked the best. They've played the best. That's why they're #1. That's why I have them winning a national title at the end of the day. We'll give you a little quick rundown of the way I think the New Year's 6 bowl games are playing out, with Washington, at least for right now in my mind, missing out on the college football playoff. Just too high of a likelihood of Washington dropping a game or 2, especially over this 3-game stretch that they have coming up with USC, Utah, and Oregon State. So I have dropped them to a New Year's 6 bowl game, Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. Same thing with Oklahoma, and actually that record is wrong. Let me fix it. All right, there we go. It is fixed now for you. Oklahoma, of course, did drop that game to Kansas last week. So instead of 8-0, they sit at 7-1. Apologies there for the graphical error. But I still have Oklahoma making a New Year's Six bowl game here. Still very much alive in the hopes to get into the college football playoff there as well. You still control your own destiny. Definitely going to be interesting conversation between these two teams within their conferences and around their conferences as well. Still a lot of big games for both of these two teams coming up. Of course, Oklahoma this week has Bedlam, probably the last Bedlam for quite some time as Oklahoma goes to the SEC. And then Washington, you got that, again, 3-game stretch that I just mentioned earlier coming up there. We'll move on to the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, where Texas still currently sits. They are the highest ranked team in the Big 12, still control their own destiny to get into the college football playoff. Absolutely could still do so, but because they are in my field, they're in the New Year's Six bowl game. So they're sitting right there, even though Quinn Ewers is out. I thought Malik Murphy played well. And that's a Texas team that maybe when Quinn Ewers comes back, you get into the Big 12 championship game with only one loss. Texas is a team that you should watch out for, absolutely considered to get into the college football playoff. And then here's where a lot of people have had Air Force, but because of the way that the committee is ranking teams, I have to put Tulane here. As much as I'm favoring Air Force over the Tulane Green Wave, this is no longer solely about what I think. This is about what I think as well as what the committee has shown us, and the committee has shown us that they are favoring Tulane over the Air Force Falcons right now, so that's why my projection has changed. Again, you have to do a little bit of projecting outwards. Don't really see either Tulane or Air Force dropping a game down the line, so you have to go with what the committee is favoring, and right now that's the Tulane Green Wave, the New Year's Six Group of 5 champion from last year, to get into a New Year's Six game this year. You move on to the Capital One Orange Bowl, and because I moved Ohio State up in my college football playoff field, the Alabama Crimson Tide, instead of playing Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl, will fall here to the Capital One Orange Bowl to play the Louisville Cardinals. You could absolutely put a team like Penn State or someone else in here as well, but the way I am projecting it out, I still project the Alabama Crimson Tide to get to a pretty decent New Year's Six bowl game, and the Orange Bowl is right here for the taking. Really interesting game against LSU coming up this week in Tuscaloosa. Already have a preview prediction video for that one. Rankings might not be accurate because it goes off the AP poll, because at the time of recording, the college football playoff rankings hadn't come out yet. So the Alabama Crimson Tide have an interesting game coming up this week. Louisville's got an interesting game coming up that's going to fly under a lot of people's radar. I'm going to try to get a preview prediction video out for at least some point this week. They have to play the Virginia Tech Hokies. That game is going to go for second place in the ACC behind Florida State. Very interesting game here to see what happens between Louisville and Virginia Tech. But the Louisville Cardinals, with the way that North Carolina has fallen off, Louisville just absolutely smashed Duke. And with Florida State making the college football playoff, Louisville is here in the Orange Bowl representing the ACC. Then we dive into your last New Year's Six bowl game. It is the Oregon Ducks and it is the Penn State Nittany Lions. Both of these two teams have played really, really good football so far this year for the most part, and Oregon looks like one of the most dominant teams in the country. You saw what they did in Rice-Eccles State, and they absolutely put the beat down on the Utah Utes. And then you take a look at Penn State. While the offense has been lackluster and hasn't really been able to generate the big plays, and yes, this is a team that did just struggle with the Indiana Hoosiers, I still believe that the way it projects outward, especially if Penn State is able to beat the Michigan Wolverines, they're going to be able to get to a New Year's Six bowl game again. That's the way that I see things projecting outward right now. So there is my Verbo Fiesta Bowl. I know this video is a little bit longer than usual, but it was because I threw the college football playoff rankings in there as well. We'll give you one final look here. That is also not correct. Again, apologies for all the graphical errors today. I don't know what's going on, but there is your college football playoff field. The way it stands in my mind right now is projected sort of by the committee. You project outwards a little bit. And again, don't be too upset with the way that I'm projecting things with what the committee has ranked. There are a lot of things that are going to work itself out. There are a lot of things that are going to change. We still have 1 month of college football left to play. So don't be too upset if your team sits too low, too high. You're not in the college football playoff. Heck, use it as ammunition for your team. I don't really care. But this is the way that I am projecting outwards, at least in terms of the way I think teams are finishing right now. I think with the way that Georgia is playing and with their resume padding up, they're going to get 1. Michigan at 2. Their resume is going to get better. Ohio State, their resume is already really good. Maybe it doesn't matter what happens there in that game against Michigan. I think there's still a path to the playoff for them. And Florida State has, again, one of the better resumes in the country, along with the Ohio State Buckeyes as well. You take care of business, you win the ACC, you're in the college football playoff. Still a lot of games to play out. There's a lot that's going to happen, and there still are a lot more teams that can vie for these four spots in the college football playoff. But that's going to do it for this video. Let me guys know your thoughts on the playoff rankings, my predictions, anything like that in the comment section below. And as always, remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see you guys in the next video. Washington USC will be the lone preview prediction video that comes out today. That'll be out momentarily. Goodbye.